After years of selflessly caring for my son, his wife looked me dead in the eye and screamed, "Get out of my house, you useless old woman." My son just scrolled on his phone. They bet I wouldn't last a week. I simply smiled, packed my bag, and left a note. When she found it, her face turned ash white. "This is just the beginning. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from." The morning air in the kitchen was thick with the scent of burnt toast and Sophia's furious indignation. Eleanor had simply forgotten to keep an eye on the toaster, distracted by a fleeting memory of David as a boy, asking for extra jam on his breakfast. It was a minor oversight, but to Sophia, it was an unforgivable offense. "You useless old woman," Sophia shrieked, her voice cutting through the quiet like a shard of ice. Her perfectly manicured hand swept across the counter, sending the plate of slightly charred bread clattering into the sink. "Can't you do anything right? I asked for light toast, not charcoal. Honestly, it's like you deliberately try to ruin my mornings." Eleanor flinched, her 64-year-old heart tightening in her chest. She turned, her gaze pleading, to her son, David, who was hunched over the kitchen island, meticulously scrolling through his phone. He had been so immersed in his screen that he hadn't even looked up as his wife's voice escalated. Eleanor swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She knew this tone, this particular brand of cruel dismissal. It had become a daily torment since she moved in with them 6 months ago. "Sophia, please," Eleanor began, her voice barely a whisper. "It was an accident. I can make another batch." Sophia scoffed, tossing her long blonde hair over her shoulder. "Another batch? And what, waste more of our organic, gluten-free bread?" "No, thank you. You know what? Just get out of my house. I can't even stand to look at you right now." And the words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "Get out of my house." This wasn't the first time Sophia had issued such an order, but each time, it felt like a fresh wound. Eleanor's eyes darted to David again, a desperate plea for intervention, for some sign that his mother still mattered to him. He slowly lifted his head, his eyes avoiding hers, fixed instead on some distant point on the wall. "Mom," David said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He finally shifted his gaze to his wife. "Just give her space, Sophia. She's upset." Then to Eleanor he added, "Mom, maybe just go to your room for a bit. Let Sophia cool down." His thumb was already scrolling again, dismissing her, dismissing the entire scene. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. He hadn't defended her. He had simply validated Sophia's anger and sent his own mother away like a disobedient child. The pain was so profound it almost stole her breath. Sophia, sensing her victory, leaned against the counter with a triumphant smirk. "Honestly, Eleanor, I don't know what you'd do without us. You wouldn't last a week out there on your own. Remember that time you forgot where you parked at the mall? Or the other day you couldn't find your keys for an hour?" She punctuated each memory with a derisive laugh. "You're getting so scatterbrained. Who would take care of you?" A spark, small but fierce, ignited within Eleanor. She straightened her shoulders, a quiet dignity settling over her. "I raised 4 children," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Mostly on my own after your father passed. I worked 2 hours, managed a household, and never missed a school play or a parent-teacher conference. I built a life out of very little. I think I've proven I can last just fine." David finally looked up again, his expression briefly flickering with something unreadable, perhaps a flicker of annoyance at her defiance. "Mom, come on," he sighed, pushing himself off the counter. "Sophia has a point. You even forgot about that pot roast you made for me last week. Left it out on the counter all night." Sophia had to throw it away. The pot roast, the one she had spent hours preparing, his favorite, a gesture of love she had hoped would remind him of their bond. He was using that against her too. It was a deliberate blow aimed squarely at her heart by the very son she had sacrificed so much for. The last thread of her hope, frayed and worn, snapped. A sudden clear resolve bloomed in Eleanor's chest. She didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked out of the kitchen, her steps firm, towards the small guest room that had become her temporary prison. As she ascended the stairs, she overheard Sophia's voice from below, bright and eager. "Good! We can finally turn that room into my new home office, or maybe a proper guest room for actual guests. I've been wanting to redecorate for ages." Eleanor closed the door to her room, the sound barely a click. Her eyes fell on a framed photograph on her bedside table. A young David, maybe 5 years old, gap-toothed and beaming, clutching a crudely drawn Mother's Day card. She picked it up, her thumb tracing the faint outline of his smiling face. This boy, her sweet, loving boy, had become a stranger. The realization was a dull ache, a profound grief for a son she had lost long before this morning. With a heavy heart that had somehow found a new, resilient core, Eleanor began to pack. Not just her clothes, but the few cherished mementos she had brought. The photo, her mother's locket, a well-worn copy of her favorite book. She worked efficiently, silently, a calm determination settling over her. An hour later, her single suitcase stood by the door. She opened it, placing the framed photo carefully on top, then closed it with a decisive snap. Downstairs, she could hear Sophia's cheerful humming. Eleanor descended the stairs, her suitcase bumping softly on each step. Sophia was sitting in the living room, painting her nails a vivid crimson, her gaze fixed on the television. She glanced up as Eleanor appeared, a flicker of something almost like anticipation in her eyes. "Oh, leaving already?" she drawled, a smirk playing on her lips. "Don't bother with the guilt trip, Eleanor. We both know this is for the best. You'll probably call in a few days anyway." She didn't offer to help, didn't even stand. Her indifference was a final chilling affirmation. Eleanor paused by the hall table, a small notepad and pen already there. She scribbled a few lines, her handwriting firm and clear. She tore off the page and placed it precisely in the center of the polished wood, weighted down by a small ceramic bird. She didn't look at Sophia, didn't offer a final word. She simply walked out the front door, the click of the lock echoing behind her auto. The familiar hum of her old car starting up was a comforting sound. She pulled out of the driveway, her grip steady on the wheel. She had to leave this place behind. As soon as she was a few blocks away, she pulled out her phone and dialed. "Evelyn," she said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil she felt. "It's Eleanor. I need a favor. Can I crash at your place for a while? And listen, don't tell anyone where I am." As she spoke, she glanced in her rearview mirror. Through the large living room window, she saw Sophia. Her daughter-in-law stood by the hall table, the ceramic bird in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on the note Eleanor had left, her face a stark, unsettling shade of pale. The quiet comfort of Evelyn's living room was a balm to Eleanor's raw nerves. Her sister's home smelled of cinnamon and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile, designer scents Sophia favored. But the peace was short-lived. No sooner had Eleanor set down her suitcase than her phone, which she deliberately silenced during the drive, began to vibrate insistently. It was David, then Sophia, then David again. The screen lit up relentlessly, a frantic, persistent buzzing. "They're calling non-stop," Eleanor murmured, watching the caller ID flash. "I don't understand why they're in such a panic." She looked at Evelyn, her brow furrowed. "I only left a note, Evelyn. Just a few simple words. Thank you for showing me exactly where I stand. Don't look for me." Why would that make Sophia's face go so white? Evelyn, ever the pragmatist, offered her a cup of tea. "Perhaps," she suggested, her eyes thoughtful, "there's more to it than just hurt feelings, dear." She settled onto the sofa next to Eleanor, a comforting presence. "Tell me everything that's been happening, not just today." Eleanor recounted the morning's humiliation, the burnt toast, David's indifference. As she spoke, a distant memory resurfaced, a small, unsettling detail from a couple of weeks prior. She had been cleaning the kitchen, just tidying up after dinner, when she'd overheard Sophia on the phone in the next room, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Mom needs to stay put until everything's finalized," Sophia had said, a chillingly precise phrase that had made no sense at the time. Now it echoed with a sinister clarity. "Eleanor," Evelyn began gently, stirring her tea, "forgive me for asking, but how much exactly have you been contributing while living with David and Sophia? You've been there almost 3 years, haven't you?" Eleanor hesitated. It wasn't something she liked to dwell on, the extent of her generosity now feeling like a profound folly. "Well, when they bought the house," she started, her voice a little smaller than she intended, "they were short on the down payment. I gave them $25,000. It was supposed to be a loan or an investment, I suppose. And then I've been giving them $800 a month for rent and utilities." Plus, I did all the cooking, the cleaning, the errands. I even drove David's car for oil changes and kept it detailed for him. I guess that counts as free services? She winced at the last phrase, realizing how much of her life, her resources, she had poured into their supposed care. Just then, Evelyn's own phone rang. It was David. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Eleanor, then answered, putting it on speaker. David's voice, usually calm and measured, was laced with an almost frantic edge. "Aunt Evelyn, thank goodness you answered," David exclaimed, his tone feigning concern. "Is Mom with you? I'm so worried. She just left, without a word, really. And she hasn't been well lately, you know. She's been so forgetful, a bit confused. Sophia and I are really concerned she might have early dementia." Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound of outrage. The audacity. David, her son, painting her as unwell, as though she were a fragile, fading shadow of herself. Evelyn, however, remained unflustered. "David," Evelyn stated, her voice cool and steady, "Eleanor is perfectly fine. She's sitting right here next to me, sharp as a tack. In fact, just last week she was explaining some new tax laws to me with such precision, I thought she'd become an accountant overnight. Her memory and understanding were impeccable. So I don't think early dementia is quite accurate." Eleanor listened, a cold dread creeping through her. David's words, Sophia's whispers, the constant jibes about her forgetfulness, now suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. They've been fabricating stories, she realized, a chilling certainty washing over her. They've been trying to make me believe I'm losing my mind, to isolate me. She remembered Sophia's sudden insistence on taking over her finances about 6 months ago. "Oh, Mom, you're so busy," Sophia had purred, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Let me just handle your banking, pay your bills. You keep forgetting due dates, and we don't want any late fees, do we?" Eleanor, trusting and tired, had agreed. She had genuinely believed Sophia was trying to help, perhaps even thinking Sophia was right about her making mistakes. Now the memory was a bitter taste in her mouth. Evelyn, still on the phone, held it out to Eleanor. "Sophia wants to speak with you." Eleanor took the phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Eleanor, darling." Sophia's voice, startlingly sweet, almost sickeningly so, floated through the speaker. It was a complete transformation from the raging shrew of that morning. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry about this morning. I was just having a bad day. You know how it is. We're all so worried about you, dear, leaving like that, and you forgot your new medications. Dr. Miller wants you to take them every time. We even have an appointment with him next week to discuss your new care plan." Eleanor's mind reeled. New medications? Dr. Miller? New care plan? She knew nothing about any of this. It was all a complete fabrication. The sheer audacity of Sophia weaving such an intricate web of lies shocked her to her core. "Sophia," Eleanor said, her voice rising in indignation, "I managed my own life perfectly well for 60 years before I moved in with you. I don't have any new medications, and I certainly don't have an appointment with a Dr. Miller for a care plan I know nothing about." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then Sophia's voice returned, softer, more gentle, but laced with a patronizing edge that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "Oh, Eleanor, it's okay, darling. It's perfectly normal to be a little confused, to forget things. Denial, you know, it's often part of the condition. We just want what's best for you, to keep you safe." Eleanor felt a wave of cold fury, but before she could retort, Evelyn reached over, snatched a notepad from the coffee table, and scribbled 3 words in bold letters. She pushed it into Eleanor's line of sight. "She's gaslighting you." Eleanor read the words, and the horrifying realization settled in, chilling her to the bone. It wasn't just forgetfulness, not just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated campaign to undermine her sanity, to control her, to isolate her. And David, her own son, was a willing participant. Eleanor's hand was still shaking as she ended the call with Sophia, a bitter taste in her mouth. She looked at Evelyn, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and growing understanding. "She's been telling people I have dementia," Eleanor stated, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Not just David, but others too, I'm sure. The question is, what Before Evelyn could answer, Eleanor's phone rang again. She glanced at the screen, a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice still a little strained. "Good afternoon. Is this Eleanor Vance?" a professional male voice inquired. "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied, her brow furrowed. "Mrs. Vance, this is Daniel Thompson from Thompson and Associates," the man continued. "I'm the estate lawyer for your late husband, Arthur. I apologize for the unexpected call, but we have some rather urgent matters to discuss regarding Arthur's estate." Eleanor felt a jolt. Arthur had passed away almost 4 years ago. His estate had been settled, or so she thought, with only his small pension and her savings remaining. Urgent matters? What could possibly be urgent, Mr. Thompson? Everything was finalized years ago. "Well, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Thompson said, a hint of something unreadable in his tone. "It appears we've recently discovered some additional assets, significant additional assets, to be precise. Some properties that were not fully accounted for in the initial probate process." Eleanor's mind reeled. "Additional assets? Properties? What are you talking about?" "Yes," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "A couple of investment properties, primarily in the form of undeveloped land in a small commercial unit. Their combined value, based on recent market appraisals, is quite substantial. We're looking at something in the range of $400,000 to $600,000. Eleanor was utterly stunned. $400,000 to $600,000? Her Arthur? She had always known him to be a meticulous man, careful with his money, but never wealthy. He had managed their comfortable middle-class life with precision, making sure they had enough for retirement and their children's education. But this was an entirely different scale. How could such a significant sum have been overlooked? She had trusted their previous lawyers, trusted Arthur's own detailed records. I don't understand," Eleanor stammered. "Arthur was so careful with everything. How could he have owned these properties and not had them included in his will or mentioned them to me?" "That's part of what we need to discuss," Mr. Thompson explained patiently. "It appears the paperwork for these particular assets was rather complex, held in an offshore trust that only recently came to our attention through a routine audit of dormant accounts. It seems Arthur was a very private man about certain investments." A wave of dizzying clarity swept over Eleanor. The gaslighting, Sophia's whispers, David's sudden concern about her dementia, the urgency in Sophia's voice about finalizing things. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. This was it. This was the why. Just as she was trying to process this revelation, Mr. Thompson added casually, "Oh, and Mrs. Vance, your daughter-in-law Sophia, called our office yesterday. She seemed quite concerned about expediting the process, even offering to help locate you if we were having trouble reaching you. She expressed a keen interest in your affairs." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. Sophia knew. She had known about this inheritance, or at least suspected it, and had been working to ensure Eleanor remained pliable, under their control, and utterly convinced of her own declining mental state. The plan was clear: get Eleanor declared incompetent, gain control of her finances, and then, once the inheritance came through, it would be theirs to manage, to control, perhaps even to simply take. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, despite the turmoil raging within her, "I will call you back. I need a moment to process this. Please, don't share any information with anyone else, especially not Sophia. My phone number is private." "Understood, Mrs. Vance," he replied, a hint of respect in his tone. "I'll await your call." Eleanor hung up, her gaze meeting Evelyn's, who had been listening intently to the conversation. "They knew, Evelyn," Eleanor whispered, the words heavy with betrayal. "Sophia knew. She's been trying to get me declared incompetent so she could get her hands on this money." Evelyn's face hardened. "Well, that explains the sudden dementia diagnosis and her concern. You absolutely cannot let them find you, Eleanor. Not until we understand the full extent of this. You need to stay hidden." Eleanor nodded, a cold resolve settling over her. The night was long and restless. The image of young David, innocent and loving, warred with the memory of his indifferent face that morning. Sophia's sickly sweet voice, her feigned worry, her insistence on medications and care plans for a doctor. Miller she'd never met. It all swirled in Eleanor's mind, a tormenting kaleidoscope of deception. The desperation in Sophia's voice as she begged Eleanor to return, disguised as concern, now rang with the chilling echo of a predator fearing its prey's escape. She lay awake for hours, the thought of nearly losing everything, not just her dignity, but her very financial future, to such calculated cruelty, keeping sleep at bay. She was no longer just an old woman who forgot her toast. She was a target. The next morning, the evidence of David and Sophia's panic was undeniable. Eleanor's phone, still muted, displayed a staggering 17 missed calls, split almost evenly between her son and his wife. "They're really scrambling," Evelyn observed, watching Eleanor scroll through the notifications. "You need to call Mr. Thompson back, Eleanor. You need to know exactly what's going on and how to protect yourself. This is no longer just about hurt feelings." Eleanor nodded, her jaw set. The time for passive acceptance was over. The next morning, fortified by Evelyn's presence and a shared sense of outrage, Eleanor placed the call to Daniel Thompson. Evelyn sat beside her, notepad and pen ready, a silent, formidable ally. "Mr. Thompson," Eleanor began, her voice steady, "thank you for calling me back. I'm ready to discuss Arthur's estate now. Can you tell me more about these additional assets?" "Certainly, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Thompson replied, his tone professional. "It appears your late husband, Arthur, inherited a significant tract of land in Montana, complete with mineral rights. This was left to him by an extended relative, a Uncle George, back in 1998. It was held in a private trust, which is why it didn't surface during the initial probate." Eleanor felt a jolt of disbelief. A Montana ranch with mineral rights? I never knew Arthur had an Uncle George, let alone inherited a ranch from him. He never mentioned anything like this to me. Never. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile this image of a secret, wealthy Arthur with the practical, frugal man she had loved for decades. It seemed impossible. "It does happen," Mr. Thompson acknowledged. "Some people are very private about certain financial affairs, especially when trusts are involved. The trust banking institution has, in fact, been trying to reach the beneficiary for the past 6 months due to a rather significant development concerning the property." "A significant development?" Eleanor prompted, her heart beginning to pound with a mixture of apprehension and an undeniable flicker of excitement. "Indeed," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "It appears there's oil on that land, Mrs. Vance. A major petroleum company has been conducting surveys in the area and has made a very substantial offer for drilling rights. We're talking about an initial payment of $450,000, Mrs. Vance, plus ongoing royalties from any production. $450,000 plus royalties. The sheer magnitude of it took Eleanor's breath away. This wasn't just pocket change or a comfortable nest egg. It was life-changing wealth, and it had been hers, unknowingly, for years. "I had absolutely no idea about any of this," Eleanor reiterated, her voice firm, wanting to make sure Mr. Thompson understood the depth of her ignorance. "No knowledge of any Uncle George, no ranch, no oil, nothing." A beat of silence followed, then Mr. Thompson's voice took on a more cautious, even concerned tone. "Mrs. Vance, I must admit, something quite troubling occurred a few days ago. Your daughter-in-law, Sophia, called my office. She claimed to be representing you, stating that you were experiencing significant health issues and cognitive difficulties, making it hard for you to manage your affairs. She insisted that all legal documents and communications regarding this estate be sent directly to her address, not yours." Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. It was exactly as she had suspected. Sophia had been orchestrating this all along. The gaslighting, the fabricated dementia, the attempts to control her finances. It wasn't just about general control. It was specifically about this. "Mr. Thompson," Eleanor stated, her voice sharp with indignation, "I can assure you I have no health issues or cognitive difficulties that would prevent me from managing my own affairs. And I certainly never authorized Sophia to represent me or handle any communications on my behalf. All correspondence must come directly to me and only to me. Understood?" "Understood, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Thompson responded, a note of gravity in his voice. "I will make a note of that immediately. It was quite a red flag for us, I confess. especially when she mentioned the name of the petroleum company. How she came by that information, I'm not sure, as it was highly confidential at that stage. The pieces of the puzzle weren't just clicking into place, they were slamming down with violent force. Sophia knew the company's name. She had access to confidential information. But how? In Mr. Thompson, Eleanor pressed, a terrible suspicion forming in her mind. Since when have these urgent matters been trying to reach me? You mentioned the trust bank had been trying to make contact for 6 months. Where were these letters being sent? Ah, yes, he said, consulting some notes. The trust bank initially sent letters to the last known address on file, which was 42 Pine Street, your son and daughter-in-law's address. These communications started in August of last year. Then, once we were engaged, we also sent several letters to that address, starting in early September. We assumed you were receiving them, as we never heard otherwise. August, September, it was now March. 6 months. Sophia had been intercepting her mail for months. Systematically, meticulously, she had been hiding the truth while simultaneously chipping away at Eleanor's sense of self, making her doubt her own mind, preparing her for the moment when they could swoop in and claim the inheritance. The burnt toast, the dementia claims, the taking over of finances. It was all part of a grand, cruel deception. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. I never received any of those letters, she said, the words strained through gritted teeth. Not a single one. Sophia has been intercepting my mail. That is a very serious accusation, Mrs. Vance, Mr. Thompson said, his tone now fully grave. This changes everything. I strongly recommend an immediate in-person meeting. We need to establish your legal standing and discuss the next steps to secure your inheritance. And I would advise you to bring a witness with you, perhaps the person you are currently staying with, for your own protection and to ensure transparency. Eleanor looked at Evelyn, who nodded once, her expression grim but resolute. We'll be there, Mr. Thompson, Eleanor affirmed, her voice filled with a newfound steel. Just tell us when and where. If you're as gripped by Eleanor's story as I am, make sure you hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe so you don't miss a single twist. What happens next will shock you even more. The phone call with Mr. Thompson ended, leaving Eleanor and Evelyn in a silence that felt heavier than any sound. The pieces of the puzzle weren't just arranged, they were fused into a chilling, undeniable picture of betrayal. Sophia had known since August. 6 months of calculated deception, of mail interception, of gaslighting, all designed to portray Eleanor as incompetent, to secure guardianship through David, and ultimately to control her inheritance. It's fraud, Evelyn finally whispered, her face grim. Deliberate, premeditated fraud. Eleanor could only nod, her mind a whirlwind of emotions, shock, anger, a deep, pervasive hurt. To think her own son, the boy she had raised, was complicit in this monstrous scheme. The memory of his indifferent scrolling, his dismissal of her pain, now festered with a new venomous meaning. He wasn't just detached, he was an accomplice. Just then, Eleanor's phone vibrated with another incoming call. It was David. She took a deep breath and answered, putting it on speaker so Evelyn could hear. Mom, thank God you answered. Where are you? Sophia's having a full-blown panic attack. She's hysterical, crying that something's happened to you. We've been worried sick. David's voice was frantic, a performance worthy of an award, Eleanor thought with a bitter cynicism. She's having a panic attack, is she? Eleanor responded, her voice calm, almost detached. Or is she having a panic attack because she realizes her scheme has been exposed? A stunned silence met her words, momentary but enough to confirm her suspicion. Then David recovered, his voice regaining its feigned concern, albeit with a new defensive edge. Mom, what are you talking about? What scheme? You're not making sense. This is exactly what I was talking about. You've been having these episodes. Maybe it's time we really looked at getting you some help, professional help. Sophia and I have been looking into some lovely assisted living facilities, places where you'd be safe, where you'd have round-the-clock care. The true horror of their intentions crystallized in that moment. Assisted living facilities. Getting her some help. Round-the-clock care. It wasn't about her health, it was about putting her away, institutionalizing her so they could manage all that, all her money, all her newfound wealth. The realization hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Assisted living facilities, David? Eleanor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that what this is about? Just put me away so you can manage everything? Mom, no, that's not fair, David protested, though his voice wavered slightly. It's for your own good. You're just not yourself. You're forgetting things, getting confused. It's becoming a burden on Sophia and me. A burden, Eleanor repeated, a sudden surge of pain and righteous anger fueling her words. A burden, David? Do you remember that red bicycle you wanted for your 10th birthday? The one I worked double shifts for at the diner, scrubbing floors after everyone went home, just so I could buy it for you? Do you remember how I nursed you through chicken pox, stayed up for nights when you had fevers, read you stories until my voice gave out? She paused, letting the memories hang in the air, accusations sharper than any shouted word. When was the last time you truly looked at me, David, and saw your mother? When was the last time you defended me against Sophia's cruel words? When was the last time you treated me like a person, rather than a problem to be solved or a cash cow to be exploited? David stammered, clearly taken aback by her unexpected directness. Mom, I love you, of course I do, but you're not yourself. I think maybe you need more help than we can give you at home. We just want you to be safe and cared for. Safe and cared for, or safely out of the way so you can get your hands on my inheritance, Eleanor countered, her voice now firm, unwavering. She was no longer heartbroken. She was incandescent with a cold, clear fury. You're not trying to help me, David. You're trying to control me. There's a difference, Vergires. With that, Eleanor pressed the end call button, severing the connection. The silence that followed was profound, but this time it was a silence of peace, not despair. Evelyn reached over, placing a comforting hand on Eleanor's arm. Her sister's eyes were filled with pride. Well, Eleanor, she said softly, it seems you're finally seeing them clearly. All of them. A grim smile touched Eleanor's lips. Yes, she agreed, I am. And what I see is not pretty, but at least now I know what I'm up against. The fight, she realized, had just truly begun. She was no longer simply running. She was preparing for battle. 2 days later, Eleanor and Evelyn sat in Daniel Thompson's downtown office. The room was hushed, filled with the scent of old leather and polished wood, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos in Eleanor's mind. Mr. Thompson, a man of quiet authority, had a thick file placed squarely on the gleaming mahogany desk before them. Mrs. Vance, Evelyn, he began, his voice calm, I've compiled all the relevant communications concerning your case. What I'm about to show you is, regrettably, quite damning. He opened the file, revealing a meticulous collection of phone logs, copies of letters, and printed emails. Sophia first contacted our firm on August 20th, he stated, pointing to an entry in the log. This was just 2 days after the initial notification about the Montana property was sent to your address. She claimed that you were experiencing significant health issues and, more crucially, that you had given her power of attorney to handle all your affairs. Eleanor gasped, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the arms of her chair. Power of attorney? That's an outright lie. I never, ever gave Sophia power of attorney. Never signed a single document. She must have been using her proximity to me, gathering personal details, perhaps even watching me sign other documents to mimic my signature. The thought was sickening, the level of calculated invasion of privacy chilling. Mr. Thompson nodded gravely. That aligns with our suspicions. Her initial inquiries were relatively vague, expressing concern for your well-being. However, by early September, her questions became much more pointed. She specifically inquired about the legal process for transferring inherited property from a beneficiary who was, in her words, mentally compromised or incapable of managing their own finances. She asked about establishing a guardianship with your son, David, as the primary guardian. Eleanor felt a wave of icy dread. Sophia wasn't just trying to control her. She was actively researching how to legally strip her of her rights, to seize her inheritance through the guise of David's guardianship. It was a cold, calculated coup. Mr. Thompson then slid a document across the table. It was a photocopy of a power of attorney form, clearly bearing Eleanor's name, and below a signature that, at first glance, looked like hers. This arrived by mail in late September, he explained, purportedly signed by you and witnessed by a friend of Sophia's. Had you not contacted us directly, Mrs. Vance, and had your sister not been able to confirm your sound mind, we might have, regrettably, proceeded to transfer the management of these assets to your son, based on Sophia's consistent claims of your cognitive decline in this document. Eleanor stared at the forged signature, a tremor running through her. It was close enough to be convincing if one wasn't scrutinizing it closely. She could see how easily she could have been trapped, how her entire life could have been stolen from her without her even knowing until it was too late. Now, to the full financial scope, Mr. Thompson continued, shifting gears. As I mentioned, the initial payment from the petroleum company for the drilling rights is $450,000. The Montana property itself, excluding the mineral rights, has an appraised value of approximately $200,000. But the true value, the long-term potential, lies in the royalties. Based on initial estimates in the company's projections, we are looking at potential royalties well in excess of $1 million over the lifespan of the drilling operation. Over $1 million. The numbers swam before Eleanor's eyes. $450,000 up front, $200,000 in property, and potentially over $1,000 in royalties. This wasn't just significant, it was life-altering wealth, and Sophia had planned to steal it all, while Eleanor subsisted on her modest Social Security and the generosity of her son and daughter-in-law, who had been charging her for rent and services in her own home. The injustice was staggering, the depth of the betrayal unfathomable. Sophia was particularly insistent about one detail, Mr. Thompson added, consulting his notes again. The petroleum company's offer for the drilling rights had a deadline, December 1st. She called multiple times throughout November, expressing extreme urgency, pushing us to finalize everything before that date. She even called this morning, quite distraught, asking if you had been located, reiterating her claims about your frail mental state. Eleanor absorbed this new piece of information. December 1st, that explains Sophia's increasingly desperate behavior in the months leading up to Eleanor's departure. Her disappearance had thrown Sophia's meticulously crafted plan into complete chaos, delaying the acquisition of the initial payment and jeopardizing the entire deal. The image of Sophia's pale face in the window, clutching the note, flashed in her mind. It wasn't concern, it was panic. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Thompson concluded, closing the file with a decisive thud. This isn't just a misunderstanding or a misguided attempt to help an aging parent. This is a sophisticated plan, meticulously executed and unfortunately, not uncommon in cases of elder financial abuse. The consistent pattern of isolating you, undermining your cognitive abilities, intercepting your mail, and forging documents points to a deliberate criminal intent. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, the weight of the realization settling heavily upon her. Sophia hadn't just conceived this plan in August. She had been laying the groundwork for that for years, perhaps ever since Eleanor moved in, recognizing the vulnerability, the potential for exploitation, the subtle wounds, the increasing control over her finances, the slow erosion of her confidence. It had all been a prelude to this grand, audacious theft. A quiet, burning resolve solidified within her. As Daniel Thompson finished detailing the extent of Sophia's deceit, Eleanor's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a text from David. "Mom, please call. Sophia's having a panic attack. She's really worried about you." Eleanor read it aloud to Evelyn and Mr. Thompson, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her. "Worried about me?" she scoffed. "No, she's terrified. Terrified that I figured out what she's been doing. Terrified that her meticulously crafted plan is unraveling." Almost immediately, another text flashed on her screen, this one from Sophia. "Eleanor, darling, I'm so sorry about everything. Please come home. I'll make your favorite pot roast just like you used to make for David." The audacity was breathtaking. The very pot roast David had used to discredit her now dangled as bait. Eleanor simply shook her head, a cold resolve hardening her features. Mr. Thompson, observing the exchange, cleared his throat. "There's one more piece of information, Mrs. Vance, that I held back until now, As it pertains directly to your son, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Someone identifying themselves as David Holloway contacted the petroleum company directly. He claimed to be acting on your behalf, citing your purported health issues, and attempted to expedite the paperwork for the drilling rights offer. This happened just yesterday. Eleanor's heart sank, a heavy leaden weight. While she had suspected David's complicity, this was undeniable proof. He wasn't just passively accepting Sophia's lies. He was actively participating, attempting to defraud his own mother. The betrayal was complete, absolute. The boy she had sacrificed so much for was now actively working to steal her future. Their desperation is growing, Mr. Thompson observed, his tone grave. And in their panic, they are making significant legal errors, exposing themselves further. Interfering with mail, forging documents, attempting to impersonate you, and misrepresent your legal standing to a third party like the petroleum company. These are not minor infractions. Eleanor now fully grasped the depth of the calculated betrayal. It wasn't just about money, it was a systematic plan to strip her of her independence, her dignity, and her very sense of self. They had tried to erase her, to silence her, to put her away, all for the sake of a fortune she never knew she possessed. The humiliation of the burnt toast, the useless old woman epithet, David's indifference, it all coalesced into a fierce, righteous anger. Mr. Thompson, Eleanor said, her voice clear and strong, leaving no room for doubt. What are my options? I want to secure this inheritance, yes, but I also want to press criminal fraud charges. I want them to face the full consequences of their actions. Mr. Thompson looked at her, his expression serious. Mrs. Vance, I need to be very clear. Pursuing criminal charges means going to war with your own son and daughter-in-law. It will be public, it will be messy, and it will be emotionally draining. Are you prepared for that? Eleanor paused, letting his words sink in. She thought of Sophia's taunts, David's dismissals, the years of silent suffering under their roof. She thought of the forged power of attorney, the intercepted mail, the false claims of dementia. She remembered standing in that kitchen, watching her son scroll on his phone as his wife verbally abused her, telling her to get out of their house. A quiet, determined fire lit in her eyes. They started this war, Mr. Thompson, Eleanor stated, her voice quiet but firm as bedrock. They drew first blood. I'm just going to finish it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Mr. Thompson's lips. Very well, Mrs. Vance. In that case, we have a robust legal strategy. First, we'll immediately file a formal notice with the trust, the petroleum company, and all relevant financial institutions, revoking any perceived authority Sophia or David might claim. We'll secure your funds and property. Then we will gather all the evidence of mail fraud, attempted impersonation, forgery, and elder financial abuse. We will proceed with a criminal complaint. As Mr. Thompson outlined the intricate legal steps, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of power coursing through her. It wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming her life, her identity, her dignity. She had been underestimated, dismissed as an old woman losing her mind. But she was much smarter, much stronger than they had ever imagined. The student had now become the teacher, and the lesson she was about to impart would be unforgettable. The old familiar house felt alien as Eleanor approached it, Evelyn a silent, supportive presence beside her. The weight of the legal documents tucked into Eleanor's bag was less a burden and more a shield. Her heart, once heavy with betrayal, was now fortified with a steely resolve. Sophia answered the door, still in a luxurious silk robe, her hair a carefully disheveled cascade. A practiced sigh of relief escaped her lips. Eleanor, oh darling, thank goodness you're safe. We've been so worried. She moved to embrace Eleanor, but Eleanor took a deliberate step back, her gaze unwavering. Sophia's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, launching into a well-rehearsed apology. I'm so sorry for what I said the other day, Eleanor. It's just, I've been under so much stress with work, and David and I lashed out. It wasn't fair, and I regret it deeply. Please, come in. Let's talk. Just then, David appeared from the living room, looking drawn and disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked genuinely relieved to see Eleanor. a flicker of the old David in his tired expression. Mom, you're okay. We were so worried. We called everyone. Eleanor held his gaze for a moment, seeing the confusion in his eyes, the remnants of Sophia's manipulation still clinging to him. He was still under her spell. Mom, David began, his voice softer, have you been taking your memory medication for your cognitive issues? We just want to make sure you're getting the care you need. Eleanor's resolve hardened further. David, she said calmly, I don't have cognitive issues, and I'm not on any memory medication. There never was any such diagnosis or prescription. Sophia made it all up. Where is this supposed prescription bottle? Show it to me. Sophia, her forced smile tightening, quickly interjected. Oh, it's upstairs, Eleanor, darling. I put it away for safekeeping. But you know you've been having trouble remembering things. Dr. Miller said, there is no Dr. Miller. Eleanor cut her off, her voice firm. And there is no medication. She reached into her bag and pulled out the first document. A crisp official letter from Thompson and Associates dated August 15th, addressed to her at 42 Pine Street. This is the initial notification about my inheritance. It arrived here at this house in August. Did you ever see it, Sophia? Sophia's face flushed. Inheritance? What are you talking about? I've never seen that before. Really? Eleanor asked, her voice laced with ice. She then produced the phone logs Mr. Thompson had given her. These are records of 15 calls your wife made to Mr. Thompson's law firm, starting 2 days after this letter arrived. 15 calls, Sophia, where you meticulously fabricated stories about my mental incompetence, my cognitive decline, and even claimed you had power of attorney over me. David's face, already pale, turned ashen. He looked from the phone logs to Sophia, then back to his mother, a dawning horror in his eyes. This, Eleanor continued, holding up the August 15th letter again, is about a $450,000 initial payment, plus over $1 million in royalties, from an oil discovery on property my late husband owned, property that your wife has been trying to steal from me. But Sophia's denials were thin, transparent. That's absurd. I would never. She's clearly confused, David, just like I said. Confused? Eleanor retorted, pulling out the next document. Is this also confused, Sophia? This forged power of attorney bearing my supposed signature, which Mr. Thompson's handwriting expert confirmed as a forgery? David stared at the document, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning rage. What are you saying, Mom? He whispered, his voice trembling. I'm saying, David, Eleanor explained, her gaze fixed on her son, that your wife has systematically intercepted my mail for months. She forged legal documents. She spread lies about my mental health to isolate me and have me declared incompetent. She intended to seize my entire inheritance, lock me away, and you, my son, were helping her. Eleanor then held up the final piece of evidence, the record of David's own phone call to the petroleum company. This is a record of your call to the oil company, David, just yesterday, trying to expedite the drilling rights, claiming you were acting on my behalf due to my health issues. David recoiled as if struck. She told me you were scared, Mom, he stammered, his voice choked with a sudden, gut-wrenching realization. She said you were embarrassed about having to deal with all the paperwork because of your memory, and you asked her for help, and that I should just call because she was so busy. She said Dr. Miller told her you needed help. He looked at Sophia, his eyes widening with a terrible understanding. There's no Dr. Miller, is there? You made it all up. All of it. Sophia's mask shattered completely. Her composure evaporated, replaced by a furious, unhinged rage. She's an old woman. She doesn't know what's good for her. I was protecting this family, protecting us from her stupid decisions with that money. She would have just wasted it all. She shrieked, her voice echoing through the silent house. Eleanor remained calm. My stupid decisions, Sophia, allowed me to raise 4 children, own a home, and save enough to live comfortably for 60 years. Your decisions, however, have led you to attempted fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Sophia, utterly consumed by her fury, stepped forward, her face contorted. You're a broke old woman. You need us. You have nothing. Eleanor looked at David, who was now staring at Sophia with a mixture of horror and incandescent fury. She reached into her bag again and pulled out Mr. Thompson's business card, handing it to David. Felony charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse have been filed, David. Mr. Thompson is my lawyer. You might want to call him. David looked at the card, then at Sophia, his chest heaving. The realization of the complete betrayal, the utter devastation of his life, hit him with full force. Get out, David roared, his voice cracking with emotion. Get out of my house, Sophia. Now you have 2 hours to pack your things and leave, or I'm calling the police myself. Sophia reeled, her face a mask of shocked disbelief, then pure hatred. But for once, she had no response. David turned to Eleanor, tears streaming down his face. The strong, independent man broken by the weight of his wife's deceit in his own complicity. Mom, he choked out, reaching for her. I am so sorry. I was so blind. Please forgive me. Eleanor looked at her son, truly looked at him, the boy she had raised, devastated and humiliated, but finally seeing the truth. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes, the profound regret, and for the first time in years, she saw her David again, not Sophia's puppet. Slowly, she reached out and embraced him. It's okay, David, she whispered, holding him tight. It's okay. 6 months had passed, bringing with them a season of profound change. Eleanor sat on the balcony of her new apartment, sipping coffee, the morning sun warming her face. The apartment, modest yet filled with light, was hers, a tangible symbol of her newfound freedom and choice, purchased with the initial sum of her inheritance. It was also, in a way, a gift from David, who had purchased it for her as a down payment, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. She'd accepted the gesture, seeing it not as restitution, but as a step in his long road to personal redemption. Her phone chimed. It was Evelyn. Sophia's sentencing hearing is today. Her sister's voice came through, a mix of anticipation and relief. I know, Eleanor replied, a tremor of nerves, but also a quiet readiness in her voice. I'm heading over soon. A lot had happened in those 6 months. David's divorce from Sophia had been swift and brutal. Facing irrefutable evidence of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse, Sophia had lost everything. The house, Eleanor's initial $25,000 down payment, even the life she had so carefully constructed around David's affluence had crumbled. David had offered to return Eleanor's initial $25,000, but she had refused. Consider it tuition, David, she'd told him, a wry smile on her lips, for one of life's most expensive lessons. The mother-son relationship was slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt. Weekly therapy sessions for both of them were navigating the deep betrayals, the years of silent complicity, and the long, arduous path toward healing. David was a changed man, humbled and acutely aware of his failures. At the courthouse, Eleanor sat beside Evelyn, watching Sophia being led into the courtroom. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfectly styled hair, the aura of effortless superiority. In an orange jumpsuit, her face stripped of makeup, Sophia looked smaller, defeated, yet still radiated a stubborn defiance. The sharp-eyed judge, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach, addressed Sophia directly. Sophia Holloway, you have pleaded guilty to multiple felonies, including attempted grand larceny, mail fraud, forgery, and systematic elder financial abuse of Eleanor Vance, a vulnerable senior citizen and your former mother-in-law. Sophia surprisingly spoke up, her voice devoid of its usual syrupy sweetness. Your Honor, my actions were motivated by concern for my family's financial stability. Eleanor was making poor decisions, and I was trying to protect our future. I never intended any malicious harm. Her eyes, however, flashed with an unrepentant resentment. The judge's gaze sharpened. Ms. Holloway, she said, her voice stern, what you describe as concern is, in fact, predatory behavior. Elder abuse, particularly by family members, is a growing and reprehensible crime. The systematic isolation, the interception of mail, the forging of legal documents, the deliberate attempts to undermine Mrs. Vance's mental competency, these are not poor decisions. They are calculated acts of criminal intent. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered her verdict. Sophia Holloway, for your crimes, I sentence you to 3 years in state prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution for any and all losses incurred by Mrs. Vance, including legal fees. A complex mix of emotions swirled within Eleanor. There was no joy, no sense of triumph, only a quiet understanding. Justice, she realized, wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. Outside the courthouse, David stood waiting, his face etched with remorse. He approached Eleanor cautiously. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper, Can you really forgive me?" Eleanor looked at him, truly seeing the earnest regret in his eyes. "Forgiveness isn't a destination, David," she said softly. "It's a journey. We're on it together." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, my son," Eleanor replied, a warmth spreading through her chest. It was a fragile beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. That evening, back in the sanctuary of her new apartment, Eleanor opened her laptop. Her investment accounts, now robust and managed by Mr. Thompson's firm, showed a steady stream of oil royalties. She was, undeniably, a wealthy woman. But the true wealth, she mused, wasn't in the numbers on the screen. It was in the choices she now had, the freedom to live her life on her own terms. She, the useless old woman who couldn't remember her keys, now navigated her laptop with surprising proficiency. She opened a new email, the recipient listed as Arthur Vance in memoriam. She began to type, pouring out her heart to the husband who had unknowingly given her this second chance. "My dearest Arthur," she wrote, "you always knew how to surprise me. This inheritance, it's more than money. It's freedom. It's knowing that I am strong, capable, and worth fighting for. The old Eleanor, who let herself be diminished, is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her worth, sets her boundaries, and demands the respect she deserves. I've learned that home isn't a house or even a person. Home is being comfortable with who you are, wherever you are. And I am finally, truly home." She closed the laptop, a profound satisfaction settling over her. Her life, once controlled by others, was now entirely her own. It was a rebirth, a reclamation, and a testament to the enduring power of resilience.